This is a short story that I wrote about a year ago. Hey, Peach! Only I called her that. It's funny how people get nicknames. We used to meet at the same corner for a school bus. She was short, I was tall. There was a peach orchard nearby, and I'd always have a fresh, high-picked peach for her. Hey! I called out, Peach! And then I threw it. She didn't turn around fast enough this time, and it hit her in the face. Then she called me by my nickname, Pit? The way she said it made it sound like an offer. How does a guy get a nickname like Pit? Well, back at that bus stop, she threw a peach back at me to even the score before calling a truce. Then later on she yelled, Pit! And it rolled down the front of my shirt and beyond. She laughed so hard she fell over. And that started it. From that day on, we were throwing stuff at each other. In all the years I'd known her, I don't think we ever passed anything by hand ever again. When the day came that she was leaving to go to college in another state, I met her at her bus stop and handed her the best peach that could be picked. I acted like I'd be seeing her again. I didn't say goodbye. I just bit my lip, smiled, and said, Peach? In my mind, I was saying more. I was saying her name. I was asking, are you really okay with this? And I was asking her, don't you want to meet me again and again? I was wishing her well and asking her to stay at the same time. She smiled and said, I'd love one, Pit. The following Christmas, she sent me the pit. After college, she didn't come home until quite a few years later. You're back in town, I said, announcing the obvious. Well, I miss this place. She said it looking directly at me in a way that said something direct. So I decided to come home. Well, if I had known you were coming, she laughed. How long are you staying? I asked. It was ironic for her to come home, because I'd just sold a plot of land and was thinking of leaving. Forever! She said that with a smile. Then she gave me some surprising news. My husband, Steve, said he'd like to live in God's country, so I gave him the address. At that moment, 10 years of fantasy that had lived in the back of my mind was obliterated. Some of what was holding my face into a smile just kind of dropped it. I couldn't have been more shocked if I'd kissed a power line. It was about that moment I noticed her belly had gotten bigger. Oh, she exclaimed. She grabbed my hand and placed it there. I had never touched her there. As I did so, one of many fantasies was lived, but not in the context I had imagined it. She thought my shocked face must have been about that. I was happy I didn't have to tell her differently. I also didn't tell her another thing. Steve had purchased my plot of land. That land had a peach tree growing on it, and that peach tree grew from a seed given to me by a dear friend. I always loved her, but I told her in strange little ways. And I always hoped, but I never told her. Yet somehow she still found out. As I waited for a bus to take me out of town, feeling a little alone, I heard a familiar voice call out, Pit? She said it the same way I'd said Peach 10 years ago. I cried for a moment, and she held it out proudly and exclaimed, It's fresh! As if that's what my reaction was about. Well, I kept that pit with me, and we traveled the world. When I came back 9 years later, I felt compelled to stop at a familiar corner. As I was reaching for a high peach, I heard a strikingly familiar voice call out, Hey, you're tall. Could you pick me one of the big ones at the top? It was an oddly familiar-looking girl. Hi, my name's Peach. She extended a sticky hand. Just then the bus pulled up. See you later. I got to watch her grow up. And when I met her at that corner, I always picked her the best peaches before school. We became good friends, and she always laughed when I told her the story about her mother. One day she came to the corner in tears. Peach? She didn't know if I was offering or calling her name. She spoke in a small, broken voice. No, thank you. She was crying really hard. I put my hand on her shoulder and she collapsed into a convulsive hug. She was crying too hard to speak. When the bus finally arrived, she turned around for a moment and said something that sent a shock through my spine. It's Mom. We went to the hospital together after school each day, and we brought a peach. I went with her to the funeral, and it was there that I learned that my Peach found out another thing I never told her. She chose to be buried under my peach tree. It was then I realized she always did love me. What? And she was just telling me in strange little ways.